11.5 million Americans have left the workforce since 2009. We have fewer Americans working than in the year 2000, despite a population increase of 31 million people. Yet, due to data massaging from the BLS, we have a falling unemployment rate, even as the US is spending more on welfare than ever before. In a recent report published by Robert A. Moffat, a professor of economics at Johns Hopkins, it was noted that welfare spending has shifted to married parent families, earning up to $47,000 a year, increasing government dependence and further expanding the welfare class. In the year 2000, 17 million Americans were enrolled in the U.S. food stamp program. Today, that number is 46 million. According to the Congressional Budget Office, interest payments on our debt will take up 36% of the budget in 2030, 58% in 2040, and 85% in 2050. However, these projections assume that rates will stay relatively low for the next 3 decades. In fiscal year 2014, the U.S. paid out $431 billion in interest payments. This includes U.S. Treasury bonds, Social Security debt, and other U.S. bonds. During the same period, the U.S. had revenues of about $3 trillion, with $1.7 trillion of this number coming from income taxes, putting U.S. debt interest payments in fiscal year 2014 at 14% of revenues and 25% of all income taxes. In 2014, the U.S. grew its revenues from $2.8 trillion to $3 trillion, a net gain of $200 billion. However, our national debt grew by $500 billion, more than 2 times the rate of U.S. total revenues. CBO is projecting by 2024 the U.S. will have revenues of $4.8 trillion, with every single year our national debt burden rising by more than double. The CBO expects trillion-dollar deficits to return by 2022. However, this is assuming the U.S. won't have a new war or a financial crisis. The U.S. hasn't been able to go without a war for more than a few years, and another financial crisis is almost certainly in the cards. Instead of including realistic projections, the CBO actually factors in 1. Economic growth, 2. Higher tax revenues as a result of this economic growth, and 3. Are you ready for this? Budget cuts. Currently, 24% of spending goes to Social Security, 22% goes to Medicaid and Medicare, and another 12% goes to welfare programs, 8% to federal pension plans, 7% to service our debt, and 20% to U.S. defense, leaving about 7% of spending for education, transportation, and all other federal programs. Wait, debt service is 7% of spending? But didn't we just say earlier that debt service was 14% of income? Yep, we sure did. You see, you have to remember that even though the US grossed $3 trillion in actual revenues, it still spent about $3.5 trillion. All the more reason to see that the CBO is being reckless when they project any cuts out of Washington, D.C. Despite forecasting economic growth, the CBO continues to use historically low interest rates when making annual deficit and interest payment projections, further adding to a false projection of our future. With the manipulation of our inflation rate, GDP, unemployment, and interest rates, we seriously doubt that anyone can accurately project the future of the US. However, we can use some basic arithmetic. At $18 trillion in debt, with a 2.5% interest rate, the interest on our debt is about $450 billion. When our debt in just 4 years crosses $20 trillion, the interest will be $500 billion a year, assuming the US can still borrow at ultra-low interest rates. If this rate even rises to 5%, the US is looking at $1 trillion in interest payments. A rate closer to a historical norm puts this annual interest payment at $1.5 trillion. Our interest payments will now significantly balloon our national deficit and pile on top of our already unsustainable debt. What happens when our deficits and interest payments explode? 401k nationalizations, higher taxes, socialism, class warfare, civil unrest, loss of property rights, the end of America. which is why I have personally taken my money out of the banking sector safely and securely with businesses that have been helping the world's wealthiest individuals for centuries. Anyone can do it though. You have to government-proof your money. FutureMoneyTrends.com is taking the time for its subscribers and anyone in the public who wishes to learn how to do this by visiting FutureMoneyTrends.com/Obama2015. That's FutureMoneyTrends.com/Obama2015. It's time to government-proof your money.